this is a norm for military families. We honestly have to operate on hopes and wishes a lot of the times. And we have to make plans without knowing the outcome on the other end. And that is really hard when you're trying to facilitate things, especially with children. Hello, welcome to Closing Chapters, Everyday Real Estate Tales. I'm your host, Brittany Fry. I'm a realtor, I'm a military wife, and I'm a mom. Join me and come transaction by transaction throughout my real estate career starting back in 2016 to hear about the highs, the lows, and the unexpected turns along the way through all of my customers. It's going to be a crazy ride, you guys. I am so excited to share the past, the current, and then what's coming in the future. Hang tight for the ride. Join me about being a realtor, a military spouse, and a mom. Can't wait to see you there. Hey, friends. Happy Wednesday. We have made it halfway through the week. We are trucking on through. It has been a very, very busy week on my end of the world. I don't know about you. Real estate is popping for February. I have a lot going on. To be specific, I have 5 different transactions going on between 2 different states, and I am located in neither state right now. So that is one, a testament to show that real estate can be flexible and you can continue to work your business through transitions. And two, the market is strong right now. I thought we were going to be slow and steady starting off. I knew things were going to get a little bit busier during the spring, but we are really picking up pretty fast. And I hope that it stays that way. But I also hope that the market stays tried and true, that we have room for negotiation. I love a good negotiation. I think it's a lot better than everything being one-sided and everyone getting everything they want on one side and everybody else having to salvage the other side. So, anyhow, let's keep our fingers crossed that we have a nice, steady market for the rest of the year and get to have some fun working together and doing some negotiations and making sure that each party gets a little piece of the pie. I just mentioned that we're going through a transition, and you guys know this. So, we are hotel living for 2 months in Missouri before we make our way over to North Carolina. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit. And like, why in the world would you choose to live in a hotel for 2 months with a dog, two toddlers, and your husband? And there's a couple different reasons. And I want to kind of walk you through our process and kind of the insight and the behind the scenes of what a military family has to decide whenever they're going through this season of moving and change with the military. So, if you would have talked to us in November, we were anticipating these orders to North Carolina. We thought that's where we were going, but you don't know until until the Army says, here's a piece of paper. You just don't know. And even then, sometimes they like to pull it right out from underneath of you. The backstory to that would be when we were here at Fort Leonard Wood the first time in 2020 for my husband's first warrant officer basic course. We were here for 5 months. His initial orders were to Washington State, to JBLM. And they have what's called EF&P status, where there's certain families that if they need specific like medical needs or specialties and a base has those, then their orders trump getting to that base, if that makes sense. So we got kicked out of our orders and back to the drawing board and got chosen to go to Hawaii. Most people would say, oh my God, Hawaii, why didn't you want to go there? We would love to visit Hawaii. I just don't know that we would want to live there for an extended amount of time. So it's really expensive and you're kind of stuck on an island. And a lot of my previous clients that have come from there have said, oh my gosh, I'm just so glad to be stateside again. It was a very different vibe. It just wasn't quite what they expected. So I leaned into their past experiences and just said, okay, Brittany, let's just stay stateside, stay close to home. Not that I'm opposed to going overseas. I just don't want to be in Hawaii specifically, honestly. I would love to go to Europe, but or to Korea, Japan, something like that. So either way, back to the drawing board again, okay? And the only way this was possible is because there was a guy in his class that had orders to Tennessee and said, hey, dude, I've been to Hawaii before. I dig it. y'all want to switch? And they allowed that to happen. So that is how we got to Fort Campbell. So our orders changed 3 times in a very short amount of time. So when people tell you that they have soft orders or they're still waiting for their hard orders, it's a true thing. We are sitting ducks until the military says go. And sometimes that's 6 months out. Sometimes that is 30 days out. And we don't have much of a choice. So if you would have asked us in November and we were anticipating going to North Carolina, our plan was to live on base. And the reason for this was it's been a struggle in Tennessee for me to have balance of working and getting out the door and James coming home and taking on the kiddos for me. He is amazing at walking through the door and just being on and letting me leave. But the time constraints and the traffic we were dealing with and just the actual, times that it took for him to get home, I was like getting really frustrated with that. So I said, maybe we should just live on base. We'll have ease of access to you. You'll be able to come and go really quickly, and that'll be a good solution. And then the more we talked about it, we realized one, the housing that we were going to have to accept on base really, we were really struggling with it. I was really struggling with it. He was a little bit, I was a major bit. We were going to be in a 3 bed, 2 bath, 1,300 square foot duplex with carports if we were lucky, and no garage, no storage to any degree like that. So it really just was a lot to take in to go down from 2,300 square feet to 1,300 square feet and figure out how am I going to, work and have space for the kids, and where's all our stuff going to go? Where's all of his gear going to go? We are used to parking our vehicles in a garage. That's kind of our rule. Everybody has a different thing. And I've talked about this before on the podcast, but I really like pulling into my garage and then taking my time and getting out. I don't want to be in the elements if I don't have to be. I want to be able to close the door and let my kids get out and not worry about them running into the street, whatever the case may be. I also don't like people seeing my patterns of when I come and go. Just kind of weird like that. I used to work in a restaurant and James used to work shift work, and we used to come and go at odd hours, and I didn't want people kind of seeing, whether we were home or not. And if we're parked in a garage and they don't know, that just kind of made me feel a little bit better. Like hopefully they would always expect that somebody was there. So that's kind of our rule of thumb, is that we park in the garage, and that's a big change for us to give that up. And additionally, we've kind of made a move that we both have gotten nicer vehicles recently, that if you would have asked us 5, 10 years ago if we would have ever been able to own a vehicle like the ones we have, the answer would have been like, yeah, right, maybe when we retire. So we honestly want to be able to protect those vehicles and take care of them. It's just important to us, and that's okay. We're allowed to have our important things. So we were really struggling with that aspect of it, but I kept saying, you know what, it's fine. If it puts us close to you, if it allows us to have the time that we need together as a family, the time that I need to be able to work and flourish in real estate, then it's worth all of the other stuff. And then we started looking at numbers. So that was kind of the emotional side of our decisions, like where we were stuck. And then on the number side, we had full intentions of selling our house in Tennessee and then just being on base for a while and regrouping after retirement in 3 or so years. And then we thought about it, ran the numbers. If we rented our house, our equity would almost double by time we are ready to retire and sell the house in Tennessee. So we said, okay, that sounds good. We should do that. And oh, by the way, we buy and hold properties. So why wouldn't we buy another property, buy another military base? We know it's a good investment. So we totally flipped on a whim and said, all right, let's do this. We're going to rent out our house in Tennessee. We're going to purchase a house in North Carolina. What does that look like? And my poor lender, I have put him through the ringer. Okay, you guys, this is one of those moments where it's like, do as I say, not as I do. Like I said, we were not anticipating buying a house originally in North Carolina. So when we had plans of purchasing a vehicle at the end of the year, that was That was the plan. The house was not the plan. So it wasn't going to interfere with each other. So then when we decided on a whim, okay, let's do this. Let's consider this. I call up my lender and say, "Hey Matt, we want to buy a house. Oh, by the way, we still want to buy this vehicle. Can we do both? What order can we do it in? And can you make it happen?" So, really, if you are looking to buy a house, you should not be buying a new vehicle anywhere near that time frame. And this can be hard for folks coming from overseas. And I'm just gonna say, like, you're gonna have to figure it out for a little bit. You need to buy a house first and then purchase a vehicle. It really complicates things and makes it just sticky. So, but he knew what he was stepping into. I forewarned him ahead of time. We talked about all the different scenarios and made sure that we were in good graces before we made any moves because I didn't want to jeopardize one thing for another. So we were going to have to make some decisions. So, either way, we were able to swing all of that. And the compromise was this: we were keeping our VA loan in Tennessee. You can have a second VA loan, so that's cool. But the limit is going to be different, right? It's going to go by the county limit. You're going to subtract out what you currently owe on a property that has under a VA loan and then see what's left. So we had, this price point that we really kind of needed to stay in. One, for that VA limit, so that we could finance the whole house and not have to have a big down payment. And then two, because we really wanted to try to keep the payment at a certain spot. The housing allowance, I think, is 2022 in North Carolina for our rank. And we're going to be paying more than that just in the mortgage. It's really hard to stay within the housing allowance right now. It really hasn't caught up to the current times and rates with like the price points increasing and the interest rates just being so much higher than what we're used to the past couple of years. So we knew that we had to stay very specific in our price point, and we were able to do that. And so we are under contract and going to be closing on a house in North Carolina next week, which is fantastic. We decided to keep our house in Tennessee and rent it out, and it was rented at the beginning of February, which is fantastic. So, what does all that mean? What that means is when we made those decisions all of a sudden that we were going to rent and that we were going to buy, okay, the other part of it is the house needed to be rented before we could purchase the new house. We needed to cancel out that income. We didn't have enough income coming in. We needed to cancel out the payment with the income from the rental. So we didn't have enough income coming in to cover the Tennessee house and buying the new North Carolina house. So there had to be a lease in place for the Tennessee house before we purchased the North Carolina house. That is really hard to do if you're living there. I mean, sometimes you can get a lease in place for like when you're moving out, but then that means same deal. Like even if I was showing and I lived in the house still, I have to get the kids and the dogs out of the house. The house has to be clean. It has to be ready to go. If somebody wants to rent it, typically they want to rent it pretty quickly. They're not planning too far out in advance. So we wanted it to be available. So it was really hard to decide, like, how do you do all of that? And honestly, the stress or idea of trying to prove that we have a lease that's going to enact and be there by the time that we're buying the house, but somebody hasn't actually moved in or started paying yet, that's super, super stressful. And we did not want to jeopardize anything for the new house. So we made the decision that we needed to go ahead and move out of the house before we put it on the market to be rentable and let it get rented while we were looking and getting under contract and going through the process of buying the new house. Uh, that meant we had to have somewhere to go. So we literally decided, like a couple days before Christmas, I think, that we were going to go ahead and get out of the house in Tennessee, rent it, buy a house in North Carolina, and then what does that mean? So we started doing some research. We were able to order a pod, like the little box pods to move all of our stuff. The majority of our stuff fit in there, not all of it. So we have some still in storage, which is okay because we have to go back and continue out processing out of the base in Tennessee on our way, which is what it is. So that brings me to another point, right? So we made this decision and we just said we got to do it. Well, uh, our orders were supposed to be like available to us sometime in January, hopefully the beginning of January. And we left January 20th, 19th, 20th, and had no orders in hand. So we had to leave and still hope that we were officially going to get these orders for North Carolina, that something wasn't going to change. And knowing that James was potentially going to have to come back to the base in Tennessee and finish out processing there. In the end, that ended up being okay because it just made it so much easier to decide to just get a storage unit, not like stress over, the semantics of getting everything in this pod. And it all worked out okay. But I want you to know all of this because as a military family, these are the things that we are like ping ponging back and forth. Like, what the heck do we do? And what if our orders change and we were going to the West Coast? We'd have to go back to Tennessee and try to get the rest of this stuff and then get it all the way over to the West Coast? Ah, right? And this isn't the first time we've had to deal with this. When James transferred from the Air Force to the Army, they made him go back to basic training. While he was in basic training is when COVID hit the fan and then the whole world shut down. And it delayed everything for him. They wouldn't release him and let him go to his next training base in Alabama. I couldn't take him. It was like he was sitting duck until he got there. Well, finally he got to Alabama, and once again, everything's delayed. Well, we were in a rental at the time, and it was a 6-month rental, and our lease was coming up, and I extended a month, and they were giving me all this hard time about, well, you're going to have to give 60 days notice or pay an additional month of rent, da 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 da, knowing that orders were on hold for the military, and you want to say, come on, you guys, you have military clauses in place for a reason. The world is like crazy right now, and you would think people would be more understanding, but they're not. So, what am I supposed to do? All I can do is get out of the place. I mean, I can't give 60 days notice. We're not getting 60 days notice on anything. And I'm not going to pay for 60 days worth of rent if we can't even be there, right? So, I made the decision to put everything in storage and I towed my husband's car and our 2 dogs and our 4-month-old daughter to Alabama from South Carolina, and fit as much as I could in both of our vehicles because I didn't know how long we were going to be displaced. And so this is a norm for military families. We honestly have to operate on hopes and wishes a lot of the times. And we have to make plans without knowing the outcome on the other end. And that is really hard when you're trying to facilitate things, especially with children. You don't know whether you're going to be stuck somewhere for a week or 2 months. So that means you're packing for 2 months. And when we did that with our daughter, I said, all right, babe, like we've got seasons changing. We've got, she's 4 months old. She's going to go through different like sizes and outfits soon. And you have to have like a little bit of everything, honestly. And it's the same thing now. We have to have toys for the kids. We have to have clothes for the kids. You have to have all of their toiletries, their bath stuff. Like our daughter is not going to sleep in a tall bed. I am not taking a chance of her rolling out of the bed. So we have brought her mattress to put down on the floor. Little dude needs a pack and play, somewhere to stay. There are all these things that come along with it. So if you are an agent and you're facilitating a military family and you're not used to what it's like to be on the side of the military family moving, please, no, this is the reality. This is not just me. This is not just like weird instances. This is their normal everyday situations that they have to deal with every time we have to move. So when it comes to housing and some of the ins and outs and like trying to take care of the extras for them, it means the world to them. I absolutely love the opportunity to try to help facilitate anything I can along the way to be helpful because I know the stress of this. I know that like they're going 3 ways to Sunday. They don't know whether they're coming or going. And I'll also tell you too, this is one of the big things as a military family that you don't think about that you got to be prepared for, especially if you're going to buy a house, is all the documents you need to have accessible. What I would really suggest is to try to have a digital form of everything. We had just about everything we needed, and then there was a couple things that they were like, hey, do you have this, or hey, do you have that? And I was like, like, please, is there a workaround? Like, we've got to figure this out. I have absolutely no idea. Like, if it's not with me in my bag, it's in a pod, I don't know where. Won't have access to it for another 2 months. So anything financial, credit cards, car payments, insurance, make sure you have a copy of statements or accessibility to them, copies of taxes 2, 3 years back, um, anything in a digital form. right? That will be so, so helpful to you along the way. And I want you to know that if you're ever struggling to make these decisions and you want somebody just to hash it out with, I am an open book and I will happily sit down with you and say, hey, if we go this route, what does that look like for you? If you go this route, what does it look like for you? Right? What's the best outcome? And for us, a lot of this was financially driven and just making all the pieces fall into line. This is not the ideal situation, right? The kids and I could have stayed in Tennessee. We could have continued life. They could have been in school. They could have been doing gymnastics. I could have been in my workout group. I could have been doing work, and life would have resumed until James was done. But he was going to finish up April 15th or March 15th, and we have a report date of April 1st. So that meant that he was going to come home and have less than 10 days for us basically to out process the base in Tennessee, pack up everything, get to North Carolina, unpack everything, and for him to show up. And I really just didn't want the stress of having to figure all that out by myself with the kids this time around. Like I told you, I did it before with the 4 month old when our daughter was a newborn, and that was a lot. I mean, I had a baby by myself while he was away. I was figuring out motherhood by myself while he was away, and then all of a sudden, I'm packing up and moving us by myself while he's away. And it was just like, if you have the opportunity to stay together as a family, sometimes it is well worth the additional steps and the little bit of hardship in the meantime to make everything fall into place. So, I hope this is a little bit of insight behind the scenes of the craziness that ensues, the decisions we have to make. And if you were in our shoes, what would you have done? Would you have stayed put and then tried to rent out the house? Would you have decided not to buy in North Carolina because you weren't going to be out of the house in Tennessee in time to rent it out to buy the house in North Carolina? I mean, there's a lot of give and take there. Would you have come stayed in a hotel for 2 months just to make it all kinda come together, knowing you have to go back through Tennessee? Let me know what your thoughts are. I know it's a really strange situation, but this is something that people go through all the time. We had friends of ours that PCS from South Carolina to Alaska, and they bought a like travel trailer, an RV to go with them so that they could pack it for one to have all their things with them. But that's what they stayed in while they traveled across country. They drove it and they stayed at all of the state parks, and that's how they were able to manage that instead of going in and out of hotels every night and not knowing where their stuff was or what they needed. That was their solution. Does that sound good? Would you have done that? These are all the type of things that we all go through and decide as military families. I know a lot of families that do the RV thing. They will buy an RV and stay in that while they're like temporarily shifting or having to, move cross country, waiting on housing, whatever the case may be. From our perspective, I think that that could be a great option, but I also feel like once you're there and you're settled and you're not using it anymore, is it a sunk cost? Did it really, was it really worth it? And then you've got to maintain it, and you've got to pay for storage for it potentially. I mean, there's a lot of different things that come along with it. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer there. I would have been okay with that option too, but sometimes you just gotta do what you can do, the easiest and least path of resistance. So what do you think? What decisions would you have made if you were in our shoes? I'm really curious to see. And I'm so glad that you were able to hang tight with me and let me share a little bit of insight of the military world. And I just want to remind you that this is why I absolutely love serving my military real estate community. You guys mean the world to me, and it's because I'm in your shoes each and every day, and I care deeply about the outcome for you and what that looks like and how to facilitate it in the best possible way that I can. I will always fight for you and care for you and try my best to make sure that we make this process as easy as possible. It is never going to be stress free. You have a million and one things going on, but I'm here for you to lean into. I'm here to help facilitate, and I am here to be your buffer. So if you need me, you just give me a call. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and I can't wait to connect with you on Saturday about my next transaction in 2018.